So, a little bit of a confession. Some of you probably already know this about me, but I spent a while, years in fact, avoiding anti-SJW content. I suppose it'd be fair enough to even say I put myself in an echo chamber of sorts, avoiding at least the most obvious forms of dissent I could have found. But it wouldn't be fair to say I ever did this due to hating or being afraid of disagreement. In fact, around the time I did that, I tended to thrive on disagreement. I still do, to at least some degree. If I agree with everything, I'm unlikely to even bother commenting, and will likely be less engaged, at least when it comes to political content. Unless I feel isolated in my belief, telling me things I already know and agree on doesn't really do much for me. And when I say I avoided it, I really do mean I avoided it. After I gave up trying to say what I needed to say on certain channels, I dropped them. Then I started dropping others that even seemed to go the same direction. And I certainly wasn't giving much of a chance to the other channels I saw addressing the same or similar topics, especially if they appeared to share the same opinions as the ones I'd left earlier. In fact, I was so opposed to giving this group I saw a chance that I nearly avoided the channels of a couple people I'd go so far as to call friends now, just because they were making something that was, in a broad sense, able to be classed as anti-SJW content. But, and I'm sure some won't believe me here at this point, this really had nothing to do with actually avoiding disagreement, or even wanting to avoid those particular opinions or views. So, if I wasn't avoiding it because of the opinions and I actually liked dissent, why in the world did I actively avoid, essentially, certain points of view? Or, more accurately, practically anything countering a particular point of view I don't even completely agree with. In a word, behavior. As in, the behavior of not just the antis themselves, but the communities and fan bases surrounding them. At least the ones I saw. The intellectual dishonesty and misrepresentations provided by people I'd previously thought were above that, even if not the gentlest individuals, upset me. The constant pointing to extremes, clearly ridiculous versions of arguments when I agreed with another form was just infuriating, especially when the extreme was alleged to represent a much broader group, and the existence of more reasonable and related arguments was never acknowledged. But these things could have just been criticized, and people could do better, or even just tell me where I was being too defensive or whatever. My first real step away came from the fact I couldn't post dissent. Oh, I technically could. Many of them took a weird sort of stance on free speech, where even preventing the abusive and malicious type of trolls was an unthinkable violation, so they obviously weren't about to block me for it. But realistically, no, I couldn't. I know this because I did, and I watched what happened after. Pointing out that what was actually being argued against as, for example, feminism, wasn't actually the main position of feminists, or even the main understanding of that very argument presented, resulted in substantial amounts of ridicule and insults being thrown my way. Is this better than if I'd simply been blocked by the owner of the channel? Maybe, but I'm not sure it is. The end result was similar, though arguably making people afraid of being attacked and then ridiculed for complaining about that is probably more effective at getting their silence than just silencing them. The latter tends to invoke some righteous indignation and get sympathy and consideration from people after the fact. The former just gets more ridicule and you told not to use the internet if you can't take people being deliberately and unnecessarily assholes. And I've never been one to stay silent. I'm really not even sure that I'm capable of it. If I have something to say, I'm going to say it, even if I ultimately just say it somewhere private or throw it out before it actually goes public. But at the time, I didn't really have another good outlet for it. I have mental health issues. I haven't made that a secret. My very first video had to do with people trying to cure strangers. I've also been on YouTube for years as a viewer and commenter, and on the internet in general damn near my whole life. I knew what a cesspool it was, how these hateful, hostile, and sometimes even month-ruining comments were inevitable. In fact, I vastly overestimated them. I was certain if I ever started making content, I'd be flooded with so many I'd wind up in a hospital or something. That's really a big part of why I didn't make videos much sooner. I expected the comments to kill me, possibly even literally, if indirectly. So, if I couldn't handle what'd happen if I'd made videos, or so I thought anyway, and I couldn't really just stay silent when dealing with things so incredibly wrong, what choices did I have left? I only saw two. Comment, as I'd already done, and found the responses were beyond what I was willing to subject myself to, or leave the channel. I couldn't watch it and just ignore whatever problems I had, but if I didn't watch it, I wouldn't see the problems to need to say something. Now, is this the best approach to disagreement? Hell no! It's not even the one I wanted to take. Initially, I left comments hopeful my criticisms would be considered. I'd much rather hash out the disagreement, even if the conversation is uncomfortable at points or whatever. But if simply trying to discuss what's wrong with something is met with vitriol and little to no hope of conversation that goes anywhere, it certainly seemed better to just leave instead. Now, was it the best approach to the situation I was in? I don't know. To this day, I can't think of a better one I could have taken at the start. I wish it hadn't led to me preemptively avoiding entire channels, but even some of those decisions seem justified when I watch, for example, Sargon's performance at MythCon. I fully admit I never gave his content a fair chance, but I get the impression that the only thing I missed in that was additional pain and frustration. And ultimately, it was the decision I made. It was the best option I could see at the time. Of course, it meant that my voice, one I hope is reasonable and not entirely off base most of the time, wasn't part of the conversation. I wonder how many others stopped speaking because one tribe or the other made it not worthwhile for them. I wonder how much damage was done because of similar issues. And I wonder if it's even possible to know or measure that. Thanks for hearing me out. As always, civil discussion, suggestions, and constructive criticism are welcome in the comments or via social media. Feel free to rate, comment, and share. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe and click the bell for notifications, and check out the description for any sources that I've used.